Pass the dutchie on the left hand side. Pass the dutchie on the left hand side. I don't know the rest of the words, so just forgive me, gang. It's easy now, it's easy now. It's easy now, it's easy now. Pass the dutchie on the left hand side. Pass the dutchie on the left hand side. Give me now, see me now, It's your boy Phantom Fuego. Oh, here we go. I'm about to look it up. Look at that. This generation rules the nation with version. Music happens to be the food of love. Sounds to really make ya rub and scrub. You see that? Pass the dutchie on the left hand side. Pass the dutchie on the left hand side. It go bun, give me that music, make me jump and prance. It go down, you know, give me that music, make me rock that dance. It was a cool and lonely breezy afternoon. I'm good. Thank you so much. It's your boy Phantom Fuego. Happy fucking 420 to the family. Happy 420 to the tribe. It's gonna be a dope show. It's gonna be amazing show. I hope you guys enjoy your 420. I hope you guys have an amazing time. I hope you guys get to live it up, enjoy, have a blast. We're gonna have some dope stories, all 420 related today. Enjoy the show, gang. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Wednesdays and Sundays is when we get to it. You know how we do it. It ain't nothing to it. And we gonna definitely dig in. Let's go. Yeah, gang, we back. So this first one, gang, this is gonna be the tale of two Harrys, right? Now, for those that don't know, Harry Anslinger, you know, I got spoke while I'm telling this story because this is the 420 special. Harry Anslinger was a very interesting individual. According to Wikipedia, Harry Anslinger was the United States government official who served as the first commissioner of the U.S. Treasury Department's Federal Bureau of Narcotics. During the presidencies of Herbert Hoover, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, and Dwight D. Eisenhower, and JFK, also known as John F. Kennedy. Right? So, and the reason I say this is going to be a tale of two Harrys is because we're going to hear two sides of this man's story. Right? And I think it would only be fair to tell his story like that. You're going to hear some positives and some negatives. Let's start with just some unbiased information. Well, everything has a bias and a spin, but let's just start with Wikipedia, right? So to continue on, Anslinger has been characterized as an early proponent of the war on drugs, as he zealously advocated for and pursued harsh drug penalties, in particular regarding marijuana. As a propagandist for the war on drugs, he focused on demonizing racial and immigrant groups. He targeted jazz musicians, including singer Billie Holiday. Anslinger held office as commissioner for an unprecedented 32 years until 1962. He then held office for 2 years as U.S. representatives to the United Nations Narcotics Commission. The responsibilities once held by Anslinger are now largely under the jurisdiction. Excuse me, gang. Jesus, I'm over here messing up. Are now largely under the jurisdiction of the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Administration. So let's see. Rise to prominence. Anslinger gained notoriety early in his career at the age of 23 in roughly 1915. While working as an investigator for the Pennsylvania Railroad, he performed a detailed investigation that found the $50,000 claim of a widower in a railroad accident to be fraudulent. He saved the company the payout and was promoted to captain of railroad police. Okay, so this dude's a good detective, I guess they would say. From 1917 to 1928, Anslinger worked for various military and police organizations on stopping international drug trafficking. His duties took him all over the world, from Germany to Venezuela to Japan. He is widely credited with shaping not only America's domestic and international drug policies, but influencing drug policies of other nations, particularly those that had not debated the issues internally. By 1929, Anslinger returned from his international tour as an assistant commissioner in the United States Treasury Department's Bureau of Prohibition. At that time, corruption and scandal gripped prohibition and narcotics agencies. The ensuing shakeups and reorganization set the stage for Anslinger, perceived as an honest and incorruptible figure, to advance not only in rank but in political stature. In 1930, at age 38, Anslinger was appointed to the founding commissioner of the Treasury's Federal Bureau of Narcotics. The illegal trade in alcohol, then still under prohibition, and illicit drugs was targeted by the Treasury, not primarily as social evils that fell under the other government purview, but as losses of untaxed revenue. So they were just doing this about the money, not about anything else. Let's see. Anslinger was given a budget of $100,000 and a wide scope to just go attack stuff. So I'll campaign assessment. Some critics of Anslinger's claim his campaign against marijuana had an agenda rooted in commercial interests, not societal welfare. Of course, it was all about the money. One example of this sort of thing is E.I. DuPont, Denimores and Company's industrial firm, petrochemicals interest, and William Randolph Hearst conspired together to create the highly sensational anti-marijuana campaign so as to eliminate hemp as an industrial competitor to synthetic materials. However, the DuPont company and the industrial historians have dismissed any link between development of nylon and changes in the laws relating to hemp, also known as cannabis. Pointing out nylon was a huge success from the start. It was not until 1934 and his fourth year in office that Anslinger considered cannabis to be a serious threat to American society. Wow. Wallace Carruthers first synthesized nylon on February 28, 1935. So in 1934, they considered marijuana to be a threat to society. And in 1935, they started synthesizing nylon and making it a replacement for hemp in the textiles industry. That's crazy. That's just me adding. That's not in the article. This was part of a worldwide trend unrelated to racial issues in America. The League of Nations had already implemented restrictions on marijuana in the beginning of the 1930s, and many states in the U.S. had started restricting it in the years before Anslinger was appointed. In 1935, both President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his Attorney General publicly supported the campaign. Anslinger was part of the government's broader push to alarm the public about the danger of recreational drugs and to outlaw them. He did this with reference to his own agenda. The LaGuardia Committee, which promoted in 1939 by New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, was the first in-depth study into the effects of smoking marijuana. It systemically contradicted claims made by the U.S. Treasury Department that smoking may result in insanity. that smoking cannabis resulted in insanity and determined that the practice of smoking cannabis does not lead to addiction in the medical sense of the word. Released in 1944, the report infuriated Anslinger, who condemned it as unscientific. So you pay these people to do a study, and because the study doesn't say what you want it to say, you throw the study away. I think that's very interesting. I just personally think that's very interesting. But maybe I'm bugging. Maybe I am bugging. But now let's look at a different perspective. This is an article from Medium. But before we do that, family, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Yeah, gang, we back. Homie, give me a brew and I might just chill, but I'm the type to light another joint like Cypress Hill. Louis, them my buff on it. I got some bucks on it, but it ain't enough on it. No, y'all know where that's from? Come on, y'all know where that's from. Y'all know where that's from. Give me some, and I might just chill, but I'm the type to light another joint like Cypress Hill. I got some bucks on it, but it ain't enough on it. I got 5 on it. Player, give me some brew and I might just chill, but I'm the type that like to light another joint like Cypress Hill. I still do be spit Louis, put a puff on it. I still do be spit loogies when I puff on it. I got some bucks on it, but it ain't enough on it. Go get that S to the TIDES. Nevertheless, I'm hella fresh, rolling joints like a cigarette. So pass it across the table like ping pong, I'm gone. Beating my chest like King Kong. It's on, wrap my lips around the 40. And when it comes to getting another stogie, fools will kick in like Shinobi. No, he ain't the homie to begin with. It's too many heads to be popping to let my friend hit bit. Unless you pull out the fat crispy $5 bill on the real before it's history. Cause fools be having them vacuum lungs, and if you let them hit for free, you are dumb. I come to school with my tailor on my earlobe, but boiling all the dick teasers, skeezers, and weirdos that be blowing off the land like where the bomb at? Give me $2, you take a puff and pass my bomb back. I can't even say this. Yo, man, this is clearly one of the best songs of all time. Grab your 40, let's get keyed. I got 5 on it. Messing with that Indo weed. I got 5 on it. It's got me stuck and I'm toe back. I got 5 on it. Come now, let's go half on the sack. Hey, make this right, man. Stop at the light, man. My yesternight thing got me hung off the night train. Yo, fade, I fade, let's head to the east. Hit the strolls and I know we can roll the big high sheesh. I wish I could fade the 8th, but I'm low budget. Still rolling the 2-door cutlass, same old bucket. Foggy window, soggy endo. I'm in the land getting smoked with my kinfolk. I've been smoked. Y'all, yes, spray it, lay it down. Bro, this song is just so fire. This is just amazing songs, man. I'm ruining the song. Shout to the Lunas. Shout to Michael Marshall. Come on, man. What's a better song to like really encapsulate what we talking about today? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's a better song? But anyway, so continuing on, Reefer Madness, the racist origins of marijuana prohibition. Now we gonna get spicy. Dum dum dum. Racism, xenophobia, and one man's all-consuming hatred of jazz. Maybe it was his more all-consuming hatred of jazz musician's penis being in his wife. But I digress. Kicked off the criminalization of cannabis, America's illegal essential plant. Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. The primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effects on the degenerate races. Quote, Harry Anslinger, founding commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, or what we would consider today the DEA. Cannabis has been outlawed for nearly a century, and yet if asked the reason why it was made illegal, I suspect most Americans would suggest something related to people's health or public safety. The real story is much more interesting than that. You see, cannabis has, and they have marijuana in here a lot, but marijuana is a very derogatory term, and sometimes I say marijuana as well because I'm just, we all learning, we all growing, we all struggling, we all wrestling with the angels, and I'm just so used to saying that from being younger, so forgive me. But marijuana is technically a derogatory term that was just used to start to associate cannabis with Mexicans and it being dirty and immoral, and look at these Mexicans who are now in our country just sitting here smoking marijuana all day. Marijuana. The Mexicans and their marijuana. So that was just hype, guys. It's medical cannabis. It didn't come about because some preening public officials wanted the people to think they occupied some amoral high ground. It's not even because of power-hungry politicians looking to outposture their opponents. The truth is, cannabis was criminalized largely because one man felt it threatened a rigid, racially stratified social order that kept him and his associates at the very top. The unredacted history behind modern-day marijuana prohibition involves warring wasp, discredited doctors, Louis Armstrong, yes, the famous jazz musician Louis Armstrong, the 21st Amendment, and good old-fashioned state-sponsored propaganda. But mostly it's about Harry Anslinger, a powerful mid-century bureaucrat whose racism, professional anxieties, and all-consuming hatred of jazz fueled the beginning of our country's anti-cannabis crusade. I wish I could show you what a small marijuana cigarette could do to our degenerate Spanish-speaking residents. That's why our problem is so great. The greatest percentage of our population is composed of Spanish-speaking persons, most of who are low mentally. Yo, would he get away with saying any of these things today? Who knows? Harry Anslinger, quote, founding commissioner, Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Despite what Anslinger would lead the public to believe, cannabis didn't come to America by the way of quote-unquote coloreds with big lips or murdering Mexicans. Cannabis, which they're calling marijuana, then colloquially known as cannabis indica or Indian hemp, colloquially, like its nickname was cannabis indica or Indian hemp, even though we now know that indica is only one of the main grades, types of cannabis that you can ingest. Indica, sativa, ruderalis being the main three levels of classes of jurisdiction. Indica and sativa being most popular here in America, but most people just are smoking hybrids. So for those that don't know the difference, very quickly, when you think of being indica, think of more of the easiest way. I saw this on a television show. I can't remember the name of it. It was a Netflix show about a family who has a cannabis business. So forgive me for forgetting the name. But indica, when you think of indica, think of in the couch. You know what I'm saying? Indica, in the couch. Like it's the body high. It's to relax you, help you with physical pains, etc. When you think of sativas, generally speaking, there are plants that help and have benefits on both ends, but generally speaking, when you think of sativas, think of more of plants for creativity, boosting of mood, boosting of lowering of social walls or blocks. If you're not a normally social butterfly, if you're a person who's more has social anxieties, etc., the sativa will help you, greatly get past all that, add some energy, calming effects, but also really help you with anxiety, depression. Super good for creativity. Some are really great for focus as well, helping you get through mundane tasks like working out, or if you have a job that's just really repetitive manual labor, etc. The list goes on and on. If you're painting your house or whatever, sativas are really good for that, putting your mind in a good space to get those tasks done. So anyway, article continues. However, at the end of World War II, sailors and other Caribbean immigrants started introducing cannabis to cool the African Americans and increasingly enfranchised black communities of New Orleans and other southern port cities. Remember, this was the era of American alcohol prohibition, and cannabis was cheaper and more accessible than booze. Cannabis quickly became popular amongst southern black communities, a population whose growing economic, cultural, and electoral power was simultaneously threatened to upend the region's racially stratified social order. Around the same time, the Mexican Revolution resulted in an uptick in Mexican immigration into the Southwest. Wealthy white Americans saw cannabis as a tool they could exploit to consolidate their influence and bolster their political power. And for those wondering why would the Mexican Revolution result in an uptick in Mexicans immigrating into the Southwest? Because Texas and a lot of the neighboring territory were ceded or surrendered to America after the Mexican Revolution was lost by the Mexican side. Or if it depends on which it depends on whose history book you read who won the Mexican Revolution, but I'll leave that alone. Wealthy white Americans saw cannabis as a tool they could exploit to consolidate their influence and bolster their political power. They decided to highlight cannabis consumption, a popular pastime in Mexican American communities, as evidence of the degeneracy of these new Spanish-speaking residents. As numbers show, Caucasian people ingest cannabis at rates similar or higher to just about every other group of people on the planet. So this is Cap, just his ghetto point of view. Ooh. Let's get back in the article. In fact, politicians were so hell-bent on pushing this narrative that they began eschewing the term cannabis, which was familiar to Anglo-Americans, in favor of loco weed. So they stopped calling it cannabis and started calling it loco weed. The more foreign sounding marijuana. See, I told you, man. It was cannabis, which was familiar to Anglo-Americans, white folk, good white folk, and started calling it loco weed so you wouldn't know what they were talking about. Because they said cannabis is now a problem. That people would have been like, cannabis is a problem. The stuff we make rope and paper with, the stuff we use to make textile, the stuff that's in my like cough medicine. People were using cannabis for cough medicine, using it for all sorts of tinctures, literally to relieve any condition you could think of. They had cannabis medicine for it in the early 1900s. You can look it up right now. You'll see cough syrup bottles with straight cannabis on it in dosages, various dosages. They recommended cannabis for almost everything back in the day. So to take something that they literally recommended for almost everything and then now change it to quote unquote local weed and then marijuana and say that the evil Mexicans are using it and it's creating degeneracy from these new residents in our communities. Just disgusting, man. Just disgusting. But the article continues. These xenophobes were so shameless, they went so far as to add a J in an effort to make the word marijuana what seemed even more with Mexican. Jesus. The way the U.S. government and the American public saw it, the increasing enfranchisement of the Black South, especially when coupled with rapidly changing demographics of the American Southwest, was starting to pose a real threat to the country's rigid caste system. These racial anxieties quickly manifested a successful, long-lasting federal effort to demonize cannabis and criminalize its quote-unquote black and brown consumers. Amazing. Jazz age excess. Colors with big lips lure white women with jazz and marijuana. Niggas is talking about Jay-Z apparently. Stop. Colors with big lips lure white women with jazz and marijuana. What you mad? She gonna be sucking on my bottom lip? Nah, it's something else you gonna be mad. She gonna be sucking on after we smoke this J. That's your real issue. Take big lips and replace it with something else. Colors with big lips lure white women with jazz and marijuana. Big D's. Big D's. He know his daughter a striptease. Hey. Big D's. I got his daughter to striptease. Hey. Trick, please. She do this shit for some Wendy's. Hey, stop. Okay, I'ma chill. Harry Anslinger hated jazz, or rather, he didn't hate jazz so much as he hated what it seemed to signal about the future of American society. From Anslinger's perspective, growing popularity of the satanic music represented a real danger to the American public, insofar as it threatened to disrupt the racially stratified social order that kept him and his associates at the very top. The only thing Anslinger hated more than music itself were the predominantly black jazz musicians. Jazz was birthed from the ashes of America's antebellum South. The genre's earliest practitioners were the sons and daughters of slaves who started off playing for sharecroppers in small country shacks. By the turn of the 20th century, the music had largely moved to the swelling port cities of the American South. Too poor to afford liquor, band members gravitated toward cannabis, a more affordable indulgence. Of course, liquor was so expensive at the time because it was under prohibition, so it was illegal. So, the people who had it, they were charging an arm and a leg for it, and it probably wasn't even the best quality. Because another thing you get with regulation is you get people having to make better quality products. But I'm going to leave that alone. More pure, cheaper, more cost-effective, better quality products. By the time the 18th Amendment rolled around, the genre's expanded reach saw that black jazz musicians playing in the speakeasies and social clubs of Prohibition-era Chicago saw these black musicians playing in the speakeasies and social clubs of Prohibition-era Chicago, Detroit, and New York. There, to Anslinger's great horror, they performed for mixed audiences. Socialites, movie stars, recent immigrants, and recently bobbed young women. Recently bobbed. You know, I'm not even gonna go there. Shorty be bobbing on that knobbing. Shorties, they would bob and then they would go to the show after they finished bobbing. Shout out to the Medium for this amazing article. Shouts to the Medium for this amazing article. Shouts to the Medium for this amazing article. And Natalie Papillon. Natalie Papillon. I'm destroying this young lady's last name. Natalie. Thank you for this great article. Bobbing. They was bobbing, boy. Anyway, the article continues. The only thing Anslinger hated more than jazz itself were the jazz musicians. Jazz was birthed from the ashes of America's antebellum South. The genre's earliest practitioners were the sons and daughters of slaves who started playing for sharecroppers in small country shacks. By the turn of the 20th century, the music had largely moved to the swelling port cities of the American South. The article continues, if jazz embodied the spirit of the age, its performers served as living, breathing examples of the era's increasingly egalitarian impulses. To bigoted individuals like Anslinger, people like Louis Armstrong were a threat to public order. After all, they'd already started to create cracks in the country's racially codified caste system. Of course, because music gets everybody together chilling. If I really like this artist, I don't care if I gotta go to the hood to go see him play. I'm popping out. While I'm out there, I'm gonna score me some good joints. I'm probably gonna talk to the dope boys that's dealing and stuff. Realize they're probably not so bad. You know what I mean? All the other people there just chilling, enjoying the show, probably ain't that bad either. And talking and drinking and shaking hands and passing J's around. Before you know it, you're gonna have brown babies. Can't have that. And the genres, to preserve his own position, Anslinger realized he needed to give the American public a good reason to resist these changing demographics, and something or someone would have to be held responsible. Dum dum dum. Reefer Madness. Their satanic music is driven by marijuana, and marijuana smoking by white women makes them want to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and others. Harry Anslinger, founding commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Anslinger's issues weren't purely aesthetic. There were also professional anxieties at play. Anslinger had risen quite quickly to the top of the Federal Bureau of Alcohol Prohibition, a large, well-financed federal agency whose leaders enjoyed a lot of prestige and political clout. When he had bootleggers to bust, marijuana was a little concern. In fact, Anslinger even went on the record to declare cannabis usage posed little risk to the public's health and safety. However, the repeal of the 18th Amendment threatened to wreck the man's professional ambitions. He ain't got no work. How can he show himself to be useful if they're no longer fighting the war against alcohol? He needs a new war to fight. I mean, come on, what else he gonna do with his time? Article continues, the 21st Amendment, which ended alcohol prohibition, threatened to end his career before it even really began. Fortunately for Anslinger, it also dovetailed with its shifting demographics and the rise of jazz. always using the music, man. They always using the damn music to do whatever the hell they wanna do. They always use the music, man. They get away with it every goddamn time. You see, marijuana was a foundational part of jazz culture immediately following World War I. Tea pads, quote unquote, homes for hosting pot-smoking parties, started sprouting up around the country. These music-filled homes were made famous by frequent visitors and unrepentant vipers, like Louis Armstrong and Cab Calloway. The famous jazzmen joined a cast of young city dwellers who used the small spaces to worship music, money, and the mighty mess. Mixed race mingling and liberal politics proliferated during the tea parties held in these mellow, multi-ethnic milos. To people like Anslinger, these spaces were potent, physical examples of the egalitarian impulses that were threatening to upend traditional American society. Can't have them getting around, talking, smoking, passing peeps pipes, and coming to mutual understandings and realizing they have far more in common than they do. They have far more similarities than they do differences. You just can't have that. You just can't have it. You absolutely can't have it. Given marijuana's association with Black and brown Americans, Anslinger realized that he could advance his career and preserve America's societal status quo by pushing forward laws that ostensibly protected the public from degenerate races. He wasted no time aligning with his personal and professional interests. Anslinger paired his bigotry with political savvy and worked to paint cannabis consumption as the activity driving this new age of immorality. In the dusty halls of a dying agency, cannabis became the new culprit. His career is alive once again. These people will do anything to keep a job, boy. Having named a new enemy, the federal dollars began to flow in. Propagandists, yellow journalists, and political leaders helped him to demonize the substance and call for the criminalization of the undesirable populations who consumed it. Filmmakers, now flush with government funding, were quick to paint cannabis users as grapists, deleters, and monsters. Journalists testified that cannabis consumption causes insanity, a still cited claim that then, like now, contradicts the consensus of America's scientific and medical community. Anslinger's decade-long crusade would see the respected statesmen fabricate evidence. He made up evidence, destroyed dissenters' careers, issued false reports to Congress, and repeatedly perjured himself in court. While it would be impossible to detail all of the unethical things Anslinger did in the name of his anti-cannabis crusade, one of the most memorable occurred after he asked aides to assemble a dossier of violent crimes committed under the influence of marijuana. Anslinger presented those gore files when he was called to testify during a congressional hearing. Researchers later found that all 200 crimes detailed in these files were either completely fabricated or incorrectly attributed to marijuana use. All of this because alcohol, which actually does cause people to get violent, which actually does cause people to commit horrible acts towards others, horrible acts toward themselves, lowers your inhibitions very drastically and can cause you to make some very life-altering and sometimes even life-ceasing decisions, was now, because of the 20th Amendment, completely legal, and now the man ain't have nothing to do with himself. Article continues: when lawmakers and medical professionals pushed back against Anslinger's unscientific claims, he did everything in his power to discredit them. In one notable incident, New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia commissioned the New York Academy of Medicine to conduct a 5-year study on the effects of smoking cannabis. The result of the study contradicted claims that cannabis caused violent crime, the corruption of children, and an inevitable addiction to morphine, heroin, or cocaine. Oh yeah, we all remember when they used to call it the gateway drug, the gateway to what? Instead, the 220-page report found marijuana use resulted in laughter, drowsiness, and an increased feeling of relaxation, disinhibition, and self-confidence. It even suggested it might be used to help cure alcoholism or other serious drug addictions, which is something it's been known to do. In 1944, the LaGuardia Committee concluded that the publicity concerning the catastrophic effects of cannabis smoking in New York City is unfounded and recommended repealing existing anti-marijuana laws. Anslinger threw LaGuardia's report out. This wasn't the only time Anslinger lied when the recommendations issued by experts didn't go his way. In 1942, he asked the American Medical Association to weigh in on a proposed marijuana ban. When 29 of the AMA 30 representatives rejected the ban, Anslinger testified before Congress that AMA's findings were unscientific. Guys, we just delving in. We got a lot more in store. It's gonna be a great episode. We're taking a break. Be right back. Yeah, gang. As always, for any questions, comments, critiques, criticisms, you know where to reach us. His ghetto point of view at gmail.com. You got that new single that's about to drop. You got that new mixtape you releasing, that new album that you just finished up, your new app, your new NFT, your new cryptocurrency, your new smart contract algorithm, your new platform that everybody needs to get on. Please tap in with me. Let us know any new stuff, dope stuff you got going on for the youth in your community. Please let us know. We'd love to shine a light on you. I was gonna clean my room until I got high. I was gonna get up and find the broom, but then I got high. My room is still messed up, and I know why. Yeah, because I got high. Da-da, la-da-da-da. I was gonna go to class before I got high. I could've cheated and I could've passed, but I got high. I'm taking it next semester and I know why. Yeah, cause I got high. Da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-doop-doop. I was gonna run from the cops, but I was high. I was gonna pull right over and stop, but I was high. Now I'm paraplegic, and I know why. Yeah. Cause I got high. Because I got high. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This is so hilarious. I messed up my entire life because I got high. Damn. I lost my kids and wife because I got high. Now I'm sleeping on the sidewalk and I know why. Jesus, yeah. I'm gonna stop singing this song. Y'all know I fucks with Afro Man. This dude is hilarious. And he's not only is he very good as an artist, but he's very entrepreneurial, independent dude, doing his own thing. Well, of course, I'm sure he has a team around him, and of course, a team around him, people who make his life easier. But this dude has been out here doing it for a minute. He's got other artists under him. Shout out to them, man. It's very dope. I like the vibes. I like what they doing, and I think it's amazing. I really do think what they doing is amazing. But shout to them, man. Shout to Afro Man. And so we're gonna continue on in the article by the Medium. Reefer Madness, the Racist Roots of Marijuana Prohibition by Natalie Papillon. Forgive me. Just a little bit real quick. Despite having no basis in scientific fact, Anslinger's state-sponsored propaganda campaign would generate enough public hysteria around the quote-unquote devil's lettuce that Congress would classify it alongside heroin and LSD as a Schedule I drug. This designation claimed that cannabis, which first appeared in the United States pharmacopoeia in 1850, and I'd argue well before that, had been widely used as a patent medicine during the 19th and 20th centuries, had absolutely no medical value. And again, this is something that literally used to be in cough syrup bottles. Now they're saying it had no medical value because they decided to classify it a Schedule I drug and represented the highest potential for abuse. No medical experts were involved in this categorization. This was simply to save the textile industries, to stop it from being a competitor to paper, to stop it from being a competitor for nylon, to stop it from competing. It grows fast, it grows constant, it grows in all sorts of conditions. It's cheap, it's affordable. It has tons of uses. It's biodegradable. It's easy on the planet. Doesn't leave a large carbon footprint. There were so many reasons to continue to use hemp, but it wasn't enough money in that. It wasn't enough money. Wasn't enough money. Anslinger ended up serving as the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics for over 3 decades. Under his leadership, cannabis was made illegal in all 50 states, and his architecture of the 1951 Boggs Act laid the groundwork for the drug-related mandatory minimums that would drive mass incarceration and an uptick in police brutality only a few decades later. Very interesting article. Just to be fair, Natalie Papillon is the founder and executive of the Equity Organization, a national not-for-profit that's working toward a just and effective, equitable approach to criminal justice and drug policy. Just one last thing. In the early 1800s, the time period in which the American doctors started prescribing cannabis-based medicines to their patients, the plant was also being incorporated into the social and spiritual practices of Latin American and Caribbean communities. Cannabis had been introduced to the region hundreds of years earlier as a way for slave owners to try and control their subjected populations. Bullshit. Over time, the descendants of these formerly enslaved populations reclaimed the substance as their own. So what she's saying is they were already using it, but then they took control of the cannabis crops. Okay, I can see that. Well, then maybe not. Bullshit. I apologize for such a strong condemnation. I get what she's trying to say. Shout to her for such An excellent article. So, now, the DEA Museum. We're going to get the other side of the coin. The DEA Museum, the Drug Enforcement Agency Museum, a life of service. Harry Anslinger. Born to immigrant parents of modest means, Harry Anslinger ran the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the FBN, for more than 30 decades. He rose from railroad worker to consular service at the State Department to commissioner of DEA's predecessor agency in a little more than a decade. See, I told you the FBN was essentially what the DEA is now. He served presidential administrations and led the FBN through the Great Depression, World War II, and the Cold War. Examine a trove of artifacts, and you'll find an interesting man, I guess. So, long life of service. Born in Altoona, Pennsylvania in 1892 to immigrant parents but of modest means, Harry Anslinger rose from railroad worker. Yes, that rise in little more than a decade could be described as meteoric. He served 5 presidential administrations from Hoover to Kennedy and led a government agency through the Great Depression, World War II, and the Cold War. Holding what some today might refer to as the job of drug czar, Anslinger successfully kept one foot on the enforcement side, running FBN from its inception in 1930 until 1962, when he reached the mandatory retirement age of 70, while at the same time helping to craft drug policy and treaties, not only for the United States but for the entire world. Anslinger remained active on the world stage long after his retirement from FBN. Anslinger accomplished much in his decades leading America's battle against drug trafficking, drug misuse, and organized criminal groups that sought to profit from the spoils of this enterprise. Unlike the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover, Anslinger has been a largely forgotten leader. That is not true. A man influenced by the times he lived in and the events happening around him. That's the soft way they try to say that you was racist. He was influenced by the event. But I mean, in fairness, it's kind of true. It's like if everybody around me talks like this, if this is how my grandfather talked and this is how my father talked, I'm probably going to take on a lot of those similar ways of thinking, those mindsets, those ideas, those ideals. If it's in the newspapers, if it's how everybody I grew up around kind of feels, I'm probably going to feel the same way. He's been criticized most harshly, the article continues, by those opposed to laws governing cannabis, laws that were passed by Congress during the time Anslinger was in charge at FBN in the 1930s. Perhaps Anslinger's greatest legacy will be his understanding. Far earlier than most, that the drug situation in the United States requires a global response, cooperation among law enforcement authorities in source, transit, and consumption communities, an international treaty to build societies free from drug misuse and drug trafficking. But all these it's about 100 years later. Has drug trafficking stopped? It's literally 100 years later. Has drug trafficking stopped? Has drug trafficking stopped? Did anything he do fix anything? Or did he just cause tons of people heartache, pain, misery through the legislations that he helped orchestrate, through the legislations that came after his initial legislations, the war on drugs, the 3 strikes you're outlaw, that those things just cause undue harms to communities based on his earlier work with the FBN, the DEA, all those task force. Did all of that have to actually go down the way it did? Was he just a cog in the machine? Could they have plugged anyone in his place, or was it his particular angst, the way he felt about Mexicans, the way he felt about jazz musicians, the way he felt about the cannabis culture, the way he felt about black people? Was he the perfect figurehead for a plan that was larger than him, or was he the mastermind that created this whole thing? Dumb. Certain things we'll probably never get full conclusive answers to, but I think it's safe to say it's a myriad of both, because you can be given a job, and they can have, the people who put you in that position can already have goals in mind for you and how they want this to look, but you have to be able to fulfill that. You have to have the juice. You got to have the passion for really doing whatever it is that they want you to do, or you may not have the impact that you're looking to have. So the article continues. In his early years after immigrating, this is a museum.dea.gov. After immigrating from Switzerland through Ellis Island in 1881, Anslinger's parents settled in Pennsylvania. Harry's father, Robert, worked as a barber and then on the Pennsylvania Railroad. Harry was born in Altoona, 1892. He was the eighth of 9 children, born to Robert and Christina Anslinger. While attending college, played the piano for silent movies in a state college Pennsylvania theater, and worked as a utility employee for the railroad in Pennsylvania. Anslinger's job with the Pennsylvania Railroad progressed, and he became a detective, then captain in the railroad police, working on various investigations in their intelligence department. It was during his work on the Penzi, I'm going to assume that's a train, in 1915 that he first encountered Mano Nero, the Black Hand, among Italian immigrants, later known as the Mafia. In 1916, Anslinger moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to help the new superintendent of the Pennsylvania State Police reorganize the force. 1 year later, he became the deputy fire commissioner. So this dude's always been involved in law enforcement or task enforcement his whole life. Going to jump ahead a little bit. Go to him working in narcotics in the Roaring 20s. Anslinger versus the Rum Runners, the Roaring 20s. Anslinger transferred to the Bahamas before being appointed commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Enforcing prohibition and deterring smugglers on the islands would inform his long career in federal drug law enforcement. Anslinger versus the Rum Runners. Anslinger was unhappy with his assignment as vice consul in La Guardia, Venezuela from 1923 to 1925. His wife and son lived in Caracas during the period, so he could have access to good schooling. Anslinger considered the experience a low point in his service in the diplomatic corps. Why? I don't understand. You're in a beautiful country. Your children are having access to the best education. Your wife's there with you. What is the problem? He was transferred by the State Department of Nassau, Bahamas in 1926. Anslinger was tasked to help address the problem of rum runners smuggling alcohol to American ports in violation of prohibition laws. This is more up his alley. He sound like he likes the action. His solution to the problem, convincing British law officials in London to accept greater responsibility and take a more active role in enforcement, got him noticed by senior leadership in the Treasury Department. Anslinger's responsibilities included carrying out the provision of the British agreement against liquor smuggling and to expand agreements to other countries. In his time there, he secured additional treaties affecting smuggling to Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Vancouver, Cuba, and Belgium. The move to narcotics and an emerging strategy. Promoted to Assistant Commissioner of Prohibition at the Treasury Department in 1929, Anslinger earned an annual salary of $6,500. In addition to overseeing Treasury's Narcotics Control Board, Anslinger suggested improvements to the Volstead Act, including better coordination among federal agencies and severe sanctions to deter and remind violators of their transgressions. It was a strategy he would adopt for the rest of his professional career. Moving on a little further in the article, 1930s, the national narcotics enforcement in the 30s. The 1930s was a dynamic decade for the federal drug enforcement. As head of the FBN, Anslinger petitioned states to adopt more uniform narcotic enforcement laws targeting mafia bosses for the first time and tackled doping in horse racing. This dude has been all over the place. So you doing liquor, you doing doping in horses, bro. What any of this got to do with cannabis? You just nothing. Stockpiles of opium. In the late 1930s, Anslinger recognized that another world war was on the horizon and recalled morphine shortages in the previous conflict. With his excellent working knowledge of the global opium supply, Anslinger began to stockpile opium in the vaults at the U.S. This nigga was stockpiling opium. Y'all playing, right? Y'all let this nigga stockpile opium, which had been emptied of gold with the opening of Fort Knox. Sure. By 1940, Anslinger managed to squirrel away 300 tons. 300 tons of opium. Where'd he get it from? Squirrel away. How do you just squirrel away 300 tons of opium? Where did you get 300 tons of opium from, sir? This is crazy. Regulating cannabis. The move to add marijuana to the nation's drug control laws was marked by a certain amount of ambivalence on Anslinger's part. He shared the concern of the medical and scientific community of the day that the drug was a serious threat to the nation, particularly its youth. This is exactly the opposite of what the scientists thought that day. The Fiorello LaGuardia report said that none of this was happening. It was a 5-year study. But of course, the DEA will sit up here and say the exact lies. By that time, 41 states had already outlawed cannabis. Nevertheless, for his role in bringing cannabis under federal control, Anslinger became a lightning rod for today's critics of the federal government's regulation of cannabis. So there was a Marijuana Taxation Act of 1937. So you're stamping and you're collecting tax money on cannabis, but for some reason people are not supposed to have it because it's bad. But it's not so bad that I can't collect taxes on it. Make that make sense to me. So it's good enough for me it's okay for you to make money collecting tax revenue on cannabis, but it's evil. It's so evil, you have to stay away from it. Except when you're paying me the tax money that you owe me, then, pay me my tax money. I think that's very interesting. So, fighting organized crime. Anslinger's exposure to organized crime during his time working on the Pennsylvania Railroad would affect him for the rest of his life. He was determined to bring mafia bosses such as Lucky Luciano, who trafficked in drugs, to justice, targeting their organizations long before even the FBI acknowledged that the mob existed in the United States. Interesting. Listen, man, it sounded like the man clearly, had a life that was full of amazing, ups and downs. But what he did to cannabis was completely disgusting, and I think his career would be better remembered, and he'd be seen in higher regard if he hadn't tried to mess with cannabis. And I really think that his career would be looked at in a better light, because I didn't know he had done all these other amazing things, stockpiling 300 tons of heroin. That's very interesting. And they said that was only a 4-year supply. Could you imagine? You have 300 tons of heroin, you squirreled it away, quote unquote, and they say this is only enough to supply us for 4 years. Good job. We'll get high for about 4 years on this bit. What? Nigga, this is crazy. But anyway, they said that was the supply of heroin that they needed, opium that they needed so they could make heroin for pain relievers for the soldiers in the war, for World War II. So, well, it's fine, I guess. Remembering Harry Anslinger. Anslinger returned home to Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, after retiring as commissioner of the FBN, which is today the DEA. Upon his death, domestic and international leaders celebrated Anslinger's long and influential life of service. Article concludes on November 14th, 1975. Harry Anslinger passed away from heart failure at the age of 83. At his request, his funeral was closed to the public. The UN Commission on Narcotics held a moment of silence in memory of Anslinger's passing during his February 1976 meeting. Citizens of Hollidaysburg also hung a commemorative plaque in the Blair County Courthouse honoring Anslinger's distinguished career. Shouts to the DEA Museum, for the great article. Definitely very informative. Definitely some stuff in here that I personally dispute, especially, when it comes to the cannabis stuff. Because again, the Fiorello LaGuardia report, it was a 5-year study, and it clearly said everything that was the exact opposite of Anslinger's findings. He had no scientific basis for his findings. Fiorello LaGuardia, while he was the mayor of New York, had a 5-year study done, and that study showed that all the cannabis was doing was making people laugh, hungry. It was lowering their anxiety, may lower their inhibitions a little bit. They actually were arguing it was having a positive effect. They wanted it to be completely decriminalized. They wanted it to be legal, according to the Fiorello LaGuardia report. That made Anslinger furious. First of all, he felt LaGuardia was going against him, and you're the mayor of New York. New York is essentially might as well be the capital of the country. There was a time when New York was actually the capital of the country, but it's still seen as the financial capital of the country, and you have a lot of commerce done there on a daily basis. You have a lot of cannabis commerce done here on a daily basis. And so Anslinger couldn't deal with that. And so LaGuardia and any other politician or person anybody of note, anybody that was a celebrity, anybody who dared to step in that man's way, felt it, got their careers halted if it was something that he had in his control to do, had their public images smeared if it was something in his control to do, and for all the positives people may argue that he did in some respects and lights, that the thing with cannabis is probably a very ugly stain on his career. And some people would say the things with other drugs too, because people would say in other countries where they just legalize drugs, the crime goes down and you actually have less drug use when you don't have people trying to tell you what to do with your life, because you have a lot of people who just do things for the sake of being against the authorities of the world. So just something to think about. But we're going to take another quick break, gang. This has been really dope. Amazing deep dive into Harry Anslinger. Shouts to the DEA Museum. Shouts to the Medium. Shouts to Wikipedia. Definitely some amazing information that we've gotten so far. We just getting started, gang. We got a lot more in store before we get up out of here. Take a quick break. Be right back. Yeah, gang, we back, man. This has been a beautiful show. It's definitely been a good time. French inhale. Ooh, I like the way you French inhale. French inhale. Ooh. Love the way you French inhale. You ain't gotta sell it cause it's already sold. You ain't gotta roll one, it's already rolled. Check out my technique. Check out my technique. Just weed, let it flow. I've been smoking since I was 14 years old. Had a dime that's never smoked blunts, just bowls. Taught me how to blow O's, inhale through my nose. So if you see me smoking, don't blow my high. See I roll one, we both gon' fly. You smell it on my clothes. I'm taking in all the smoke when I French inhale. I love the way you French inhale. Yeah. I take it to the face, inhale it through my nose. Blow it with my homies on the low, man, fuck these hoes. And crack a lack, peel it back. What you call a Mac? What you call a Mac who crack what you call a Mac who crack a mad one like that? A cracker jack. I'm like a florist touring like a tourist. Godzilla flying on a Pegasaurus. Niggas, niggas know about it even before I pull it out. I put some fire on it, now they begging me to put it out. I'm in the hallway rolling on a purple psyche. I know the ins and outs, so I'ma do what I like. French inhale. Ooh, love the way you French inhale. French inhale. Ooh, love the way you French inhale. It's your boy Phantom Fuego, man. It is your boy Phantom Fuego. And this has been a very fun episode, man. What can I say about an episode like this, man? This is a good time for me. So, and this is only part 1 game. We got part 2 coming this week. This is gonna be crazy. We're gonna get into some real interesting stuff in part 2. Some of the legals, some of the spirituals. It's going to be interesting. You definitely don't want to miss part 2. Tell a friend and tell a friend. Tap in. Part 2 is dropping this week. We got a lot more to say about the 420s, So, from Connoisseur.com, The Devil's Harvest, How Reefer Madness Became a Pro-Weed Movie. Now, for those that are not aware, Reefer Madness and The Devil's Harvest, The Devil's Harvest and Reefer Madness, those were movies. They were cannabis propaganda. They were anti-cannabis propaganda. It's like they're trying to make it seem bad, but actually these movies may have worked against them. So, and I'll let the article explain. In a weird twilight world of anti-drug propaganda films, few can touch 1936's Reefer Madness for its rabid misinformation and wrong-headed execution. Intended as a warning to parents about the dangers of cannabis, its story about a pair of teenagers whose introduction to cannabis leads to addiction, insanity, and murder is cruelly executed, performed in near hysterics, and so devoid of anything resembling rational behavior that it suggests that no actual humans were behind the camera. The culprit was French director Louis Gasnier, a former specialist in silent comedy whose career ended shortly after its release. Despite its kindergarten surrealism, Reefer Madness actually reflected the American government's attitude toward marijuana at the time. Harry Anslinger, the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, what we know as the DEA now, stoked public fears about marijuana through deceptive and decidedly racist stories about its ability to loosen the sanity of moral users. Loosen the sanity and morals of users. He did this in order to sway public opinion against cannabis and to enact the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. So again, it's so bad, I'm not going to ban it. I'm just going to make you pay me. Just like today, guys. I don't know if y'all aware, but there's laws on the books here in America where it's like anything you're doing that's quote unquote illegal, just make sure you're paying your taxes. And that's something that people low-key never realized. It was never really a thing about not selling can or things. You have to just pay your taxes. Which levied fees for selling or prescribing cannabis. Support for the act from newspaper tycoons like William Randolph Hearst and films like Reefer Madness helped to push the bill into law, where it remained until its repeal in 1970. The people responsible for Reefer Madness may have faded into obscurity. Gasnier reportedly died broke, while the 1952 obituary for producer George Harliman cites numerous low-budget productions, yet not Reefer Madness. But the film itself would enjoy a second act in the decades that followed, although as propaganda of an entirely different kind than its creators intended. That is a fact. That is a fact. People love this movie now. In 1972, Kenneth Stroop, director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or NORML, discovered a print in the Library of Congress Film Archives. Harliman had apparently forgotten to retain its copyright, allowing the film to elapse into public domain. Stroop then screened it as a part of a 1972 benefit. Audiences were floored by its incredible naivete about cannabis, and word of mouth made Reefer Madness not only a staple of the midnight movie circuit alongside the Rocky Horror Picture Show and El Topo, but also a new catchphrase for out-of-date and out-of-touch attitudes towards cannabis. Not everyone appears to have gotten the joke, as evidenced by author Alex Berenson, who employed the original title of Reefer Madness, Tell Your Children, for his fear-mongering anti-cannabis book. Yes, the original name of the movie was Tell Your Children. You can't make this shit up. Due to its public domain status, Reefer Madness has been long a staple of cheap home video releases, but a new Blu-ray from Kino Lorber, which partners the film with the equally out of lunch Sex Madness, Sex Madness, offers what Lisa Petrucci of Something Weird Video, which teamed with Kino for its release as part of the series Forbidden Fruits, the golden age of exploitation in film, calls the best quality restoration out there. The Blu-ray features commentary from Eric Schaefer, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. The article goes on to say, Reefer Madness is a textbook example of an exploitation film. For some, the term simply means trashy or sleazy, but an exploitation film scholar can tell us what criteria defines an exploitation film. So Dr. Eric Schaefer, the term exploitation film originally referred to a movie that did not have big stars or fall into an easily recognizable genre and thus needed additional exploitation beyond the usual posters and advertising to find an audience. Oh, okay. Such films included early documentary features, religious films, and movies that dealt with sensitive or sensational topics that often defied state or local censorship or the film industry's efforts at self-regulation. By the time you get into the late 1920s and early 30s, exploitation was most often applied to low-budget films that were made by independents operating on the fringe of the mainstream industry and dealt with forbidden topics like sex hygiene, nudism, and drug use. When we get to the mid-1950s, the term came to encompass almost any cheaply made film designed to make a quick buck. And just in general, the term exploitation in entertainment does mean to maximize how you are presenting it to the public and to maximize the money you could potentially make off of it. Pushing it, promoting it, marketing it. That is what it means to exploit content. So then this goes into a Q&A. As you mentioned in the commentary track for Reefer Madness was one of the 3 exploitation films traveling the country in a roadshow presentation in the late 1930s, including Marijuana and Assassin of Youth. What made cannabis such a concern and a topic for exploitation during the period? Cannabis really, this is their answer, cannabis really burst into the public consciousness. And again, this is Dr. Eric Schaefer answering. And for those that don't know, he's the professor of visual and media arts at Emerson College and the author of Bold, Daring, Shocking, True, a history of exploitation films from 1919 to 1959. So he spoke to Mary Jane about the legacy of Reefer Madness, its cult appeal, and its convoluted history, both as an anti-pot and then later as a pro-pot movie. Continuing on, marijuana, Dr. Eric Schaefer says marijuana really burst into the public consciousness in the 1930s as a result of the efforts of Harry Anslinger, the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which became today's DEA. As we've talked about a few times in this episode, marijuana use was primarily associated with African Americans and Mexican laborers, and Anslinger perpetuated the idea that its use was widespread to white middle-class teens who would and would degrade them, making them unproductive. Drug policy has historically been used in the United States to control minority groups, going back to the anti-opium policies used against the Chinese in the 19th century to crack cocaine policies used against Black Americans in the 1980s. So they've been on this type of time since the 1800s, family. These programs have almost always been misguided and have had devastating unintended social and economic consequences. Most of the anti-marijuana effort was rooted in racism and classism, and Anslinger spun stories about average kids becoming murderers or hopelessly insane under its influence. There was also the suggestion that cannabis broke down sexual inhibitions and could lead to mixed race parties and unwanted pregnancies. Oh no. And alcohol doesn't do this? I would argue alcohol does this far more than cannabis. Of course, by that time, any mention of drug use was forbidden in Hollywood movies by the production code. And since exploitation movies depended on the sensational and the taboo to bring in ticket buyers, the campaign against marijuana made the perfect match, meaning they were able to sell the movie, exploit the movie. Again, this is an exploitation film. It doesn't fall into regular fandom. It doesn't have a superstar. It didn't have a Will Smith or a Meryl Streep or anybody signed on to be the actor, or Robin Williams, or I guess back in that time, a Laurel and Hardy, or a Charlie Chaplin. Didn't have any of these people. Didn't have Charlie Chaplin. Wasn't a big MGM production. Ralph Cramden, whoever. So they needed to exploit the movie through the sensationalism, through the mystique, through what's all the buzz about, what's all the hype, why are people so enraged about this anyway? Man, this is very dope. Is there any indication that audiences took it seriously? Again, they're asking these questions of Dr. Eric Schaefer, PhD, professor of visual and media arts at Emerson College, because he did the commentary on the Blu-ray known as Forbidden Fruits, the golden age of exploitation film. So is there any indication that audiences took this seriously? Professor Eric Schaefer, they're asking this question to. Shout to Canasaur. Once again, it's impossible to say whether all audience members in all places took the anti-pot films seriously, but no doubt many did, and the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and certain law enforcement agencies may have seen it as providing a useful anti-pot message. Sometimes you'd see a particular social organization or women's club saying, yes, this is providing a public service. But for every one of those, there were 2 or 3 others that said, oh my God, if you show people this stuff, they'll be enticed into having sex or doing drugs. And to be honest, that people argue that, like, a lot of those anti-drug campaigns, like when they would have the people go into the schools and teach children, oh, these are the drugs, you're kind of intriguing them, you're kind of interesting them in doing it, and you probably shouldn't do that. Same thing with sex education. They say that may actually increase some people's willingness and desire to experiment, because now you're introducing ideas and concepts to them and giving them pretty much essentially a roadmap to do it in a quote-unquote safe fashion. Just saying. You tell people to not touch the stove, some motherfuckers is going to touch the stove. This is just reality. Some motherfuckers is going to touch the stove. So article continues. They wrote a rail between going seedy and having a message that was, at least at the time, somewhat educational. But the movies reinforced all the information people were reading in newspapers and popular magazines. And they did so in a very vivid way. Not only countervailing evidence at the time, the only countervailing evidence at the time would have come from personal experience with cannabis. Right. So that literally still goes for today. So many people believe the myths about cannabis because they've never really used cannabis themselves, except maybe once or twice. They didn't like how it made them feel, and they never tried again. And so they may have had a negative experience. They may have smoked some bad cannabis, some crappy cannabis. They may have smoked something that wasn't cannabis at all, but their friends told them it was. And either these negative anecdotal experiences or their friends' anecdotal experiences or whatever they're just seeing in the media fuels how they think. So when other people tell them, it's great, what are you talking about? They don't want to hear that shit. They don't want to hear that shit at all. When people tell them, well, this stuff stops kids from having seizures. What? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. There's no healing benefits to that. I don't know what you're talking about. But the movies reinforced all the information people were reading in newspapers and popular magazines, and they did so in a very vivid way. While the blame for anti-cannabis hysteria can't be solely pinned on Reefer Madness, it contributed to the campaign of propaganda against the flowers. So, article is definitely dope. Let me get one more question out of here. Or maybe two. Let's dispel a couple myths about Reefer Madness. One is that the film was produced by a religious organization. Wow, didn't know that. We can't entirely rule out that the position that a church or religious group put up funds for Reefer Madness, but I've never seen any solid evidence that would support the connection. First, we might expect some mention of sponsorship to be made in the credits, and there is none. But I mean, if I'm a church group and I don't want people to know that I did this, I just want the information out there, then I may say, here's the money, don't put my name on it. Second, given what a bust alcohol prohibition turned into, which had tremendous support from many Christian denominations, religious groups may have been a little wary of starting another crusade. If someone could show me evidence that Reefer Madness was backed by a religious group, I'd love to see it. But again, so many people pay for projects and just don't want their names on the projects. So I could see a world where the Catholic or the Christian church helped pay for this and just said, just don't put our names on it. And let's go here. Why was Reefer Madness such a hit on the midnight movie circuit? It's because people are high. People are high and drunk at night, getting out the club, and this shit was just probably like, wow, look at this is a trip. People are high as hell probably watching this, tripping out. Why? As more and more people experimented with cannabis in the 1960s, they realized that its effects were not significantly different than having a few drinks or beers. The potency of cannabis has seriously changed over the last 50 years. The potency of good cannabis. But I'll leave that alone. There's still some cannabis out here that don't do much to you. And, CBD doesn't get you high at all. If somebody who doesn't want the psychotropic effects, but just looking for, the pain relief, anti-inflammation, etc. If somebody who's just looking for sleeping, somebody's just looking for anti-anxiety or something to cope with PTSD or to help their children cope with seizures, depression, etc. CBA, CBD, CBG, CBN. That's CBVA. I mean, those additional compounds inside the cannabis plant, those very healing compounds, would be where I would suggest those people look. When Reefer Madness returned to the screen in the early 70s, it was met by an audience who had first-hand experience with it, unlike the 30s and 40s. The warnings of Reefer Madness and other pre-World War II anti-pot films seemed ludicrous and became the object of great derision. Dr. Carroll's huffing and puffing about the evils of marijuana, Ralph's freakout, and all the other scenes flew in the face of people's lived experience and served as kind of a reverse object lesson. Very dope article. Very dope article. Very dope article. Definitely shout to them. Shouts to Canasaur. Shout to Canasaur magazine. Excellent articles, excellent read, and this has been a really dope episode. I super appreciate getting to rock and vibe with you all as always. Part 2 of our 420 special will be out later this week. Pay attention for the drop. Make sure you turn your notifications on so you never miss a moment. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Wednesdays and Sundays is when we get to it. You know how we do it. It ain't nothing to it. Also gang. Except this week where we'll be dropping another drop during the week for the 420 special, and then we'll be back again on our regular schedule on Sunday. But also, all of season 1 is now officially on YouTube. So, much love to Spotify, much love to Anchor, much love to all Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, and all of the other amazing platforms that the show is available on. But if you're not on Pocket Cast, if you're not on Overcast, if you're not Pocket Cast FM, you're not on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc., you can catch us on YouTube, or if you just want to hear the old episodes back while you're at work, while you're at the gym, etc., YouTube. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Wednesdays and Sundays is when we get to it. HisGhettoPointOfView.com. HisGhettoPointOfView.com for any questions, comments, critiques, criticisms, likes, dislikes, tips, news articles, information you think I should have, dope people you think I should be aware of, dope projects you think we should be keeping our ear to, and keeping our paying attention a little bit to. Please tap in with us. HisGhettoPointOfView@gmail.com, HGPOV show, His Ghetto Point of View podcast on IG. This has been dope, gang. This is only part 1 and 2. Hit those notification bells, set the reminders so you never miss a second. Love, gang. See you soon. Happy 420. Shit.